The thick jungle air hung heavy with moisture as Princess Zarathek moved silently through the dense undergrowth of Zarian Prime. Her massive form, nearly 9 feet of scaled muscle and natural armor, cut through the vegetation with practiced ease. Behind her, 6 other Valkyrie warriors followed in formation, their claws extended and ready for the hunt. The hunting party had been tracking a pack of razorbacks for 3 days now. These pig-like creatures with metallic tusks provided excellent meat for the clan, and their hide made superior armor when properly treated. Princess Zarathek could smell their musky scent growing stronger with each step. Her yellow reptilian eyes scanned the forest floor. Reading the signs that lesser hunters would miss entirely, she raised her clawed hand, bringing the hunting party to an immediate halt. Something was wrong. The forest had gone completely silent, and the razorback scent trail had suddenly ended. In the distance, she could hear a strange humming sound that did not belong to any creature she knew. Her forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air for any hint of danger or opportunity. "Princess," whispered Gorvak, her second in command. "The scent ends here, but there are no tracks leading away." Zarathek nodded slowly. The razorbacks had either found a way to mask their trail completely, which seemed unlikely, or something else had driven them off. The humming sound grew louder, and she realized it was coming from somewhere ahead through the trees. It had a mechanical quality that made her scales prickle with unease. She gestured for the hunting party to advance with extreme caution. They moved forward in a loose semicircle, weapons ready. The humming sound was definitely not natural. As they pushed through a thick wall of purple-leafed bush, the source of the noise became clear. Before them lay a massive crater carved into the jungle floor. Trees had been snapped like twigs and scattered in all directions. In the center of the destruction sat a strange metal object, roughly oval in shape, and covered with what looked like burn marks. The humming was coming from this alien thing, though it was growing weaker by the moment. "What manner of creature builds such a shell?" asked Theric, the youngest warrior in the group. Zarathek studied the object carefully. It was clearly not natural, but neither did it match any technology her people possessed. The metal was smooth and silver, unlike anything the Valkyrie crafted. Strange markings covered its surface, symbols that meant nothing to her but somehow suggested intelligence. Behind their creation, the humming suddenly stopped completely. The jungle remained eerily quiet, as if all the wildlife had fled the area. Then, with a sharp hissing sound, part of the metal shell began to open. The warriors immediately raised their weapons, expecting some new predator to emerge. Instead, what crawled out of the opening shocked them into momentary stillness. It was a tiny creature, no larger than a Valkyrie child, but completely unlike anything they had ever seen. Its skin was a pale pink color with no scales or natural armor. It had strange, fuzzy growth on top of its head and wore artificial coverings over most of its body. Most disturbing of all, it was bleeding from several wounds and could barely stand. The creature took 2 stumbling steps before collapsing onto the jungle floor. It lay there breathing heavily, its small chest rising and falling rapidly. One of its upper limbs was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. "Kill it quickly," suggested Gorvak. "It is obviously dying already, and we should not let it suffer," but Princess Zarathek found herself strangely hesitant. There was something about the small being that intrigued her. Despite its obvious pain and injuries, its eyes remained alert and aware. When it noticed the Valkyrie standing around it, those eyes showed no panic or mindless terror. Instead, there was a quality of intelligence there, and something else that she recognized from her own reflection: defiance. She knelt down beside the wounded creature, studying it more closely. It was definitely young, though she had no way to judge its actual age. The artificial coverings it wore were torn and stained with its strange red blood. Its breathing was becoming more labored, and she could see that, without help, it would be dead within the hour. "Princess, we should return to hunting the razorbacks," urged Theric. "This thing is clearly some kind of weak prey animal. It has no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons at all." Zarathek continued to examine the creature. Theric was right about its apparent helplessness. It seemed completely defenseless. with soft skin that offered no protection and limbs that appeared fragile beyond belief. Yet something about it continued to fascinate her. Perhaps it was the way it met her gaze without flinching, or the subtle signs of intelligence in its behavior. The creature tried to speak, making soft sounds that might have been attempts at communication. The sounds were nothing like Valkyrie speech, but they had a rhythm and pattern that suggested language. When it realized the Valkyrie could not understand, it tried pointing to its wounds and then to a small device that had fallen nearby. "It is trying to communicate," Zarathek observed. "See how it attempts to show us its injuries?" "This suggests reasoning ability," Gorvik snorted dismissively. "Many prey animals can learn simple tricks, Princess. That does not make them worth our time," but Zarathek had already made her decision. She carefully lifted the small creature, surprised by how light it was compared to even the smallest Valkyrie. It made no attempt to struggle or attack, though its muscles tensed with pain from the movement. "We return to the settlement," she announced. "The Razorbacks can wait." "Princess," Gorvek protested, "your father will not be pleased if we return from a hunt carrying wounded prey instead of food." Zarathek fixed him with a stare that reminded him exactly who held authority in this hunting party. "My father values curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge as much as he values successful hunts." This creature fell from the sky in a metal shell, suggesting it comes from somewhere far beyond our world. "Surely such a thing deserves closer study." The other warriors exchanged glances but said nothing more. They had learned long ago not to question Princess Zarathek when she had made up her mind about something. Besides, she was the best hunter in the clan and had never led them astray before. As they began the journey back to their settlement, Zarathek found herself wondering what exactly she had found. The creature remained conscious but quiet during the trip, its strange eyes taking in everything around them. She had the distinct impression it was studying them just as intently as they were studying it. By the time they reached the outer boundaries of Valkyrie territory, word of their unusual discovery had already begun to spread. Warriors and civilians alike gathered to stare at the strange pink creature that their princess carried so carefully. "What is it?" asked an elderly female as they passed. "A new kind of pet, perhaps?" suggested another. "Looks too weak to be useful for anything," commented a warrior with obvious disdain. Zarathek ignored the comments and questions, carrying her burden directly to the clan's medical area. The creature needed immediate attention if it was going to survive long enough for her to learn more about it. As she worked to clean and bandage its wounds, she found herself speaking to it in soft tones, though she knew it could not understand her words. "Rest now, little one," she murmured. "Tomorrow, we will see what secrets you carry." 3 years had passed since Princess Zarathek brought the strange creature back to the Valkyrie settlement. The small being had not only survived his injuries but had grown stronger and taller, though he still remained tiny compared to the massive reptilian warriors who surrounded him daily. The creature had learned to speak their language with surprising speed. He told them his name was Danny Carter and that he came from a place called Earth, far beyond the stars. Most Valkyrie dismissed these claims as the fantasies of a simple mind, but Zarathek found his stories fascinating. He spoke of vast cities, made of metal and glass, of flying machines that could travel between worlds, and of his own kind who lived without claws or natural armor yet somehow thrived. Danny lived in a small cage within the princess's personal quarters. The cage was not locked, as everyone knew the weak little creature could never survive outside the settlement on his own. He was fed scraps from the warriors' meals and given water from the same containers used for pets. Most Valkyrie treated him as an amusing curiosity, something to point at and laugh about when they walked past. "Look at the helpless hatchling," they would say to each other. "See how it cowers when thunder rolls across the sky." Princess Zarathek's pet grows fat from too much food and too little work. Others would comment with amusement, but Danny was not cowering or growing fat. He was watching and learning. Every day he observed how the Valkyrie moved, how they fought during training sessions, how they held their weapons and positioned their bodies for maximum strength. His human mind absorbed these lessons with a hunger that surprised even him. When the warriors practiced combat in the training grounds, Danny would position himself where he could see everything clearly. He studied their techniques with intense focus, memorizing every movement and analyzing every weakness. The Valkyrie fought with brutal power and natural weapons, but Danny began to notice patterns in their attacks that seemed predictable once understood. Late at night, when the settlement was mostly asleep, Danny would practice in secret. He had found several broken weapons that the Valkyrie had discarded as worthless. A cracked sword blade, a bent spear tip, pieces of armor too small even for their youngest warriors. These became his training tools. His human body was different from theirs, in ways that slowly became advantages. Where they relied on raw strength and thick scales for protection, he developed speed and agility. His smaller size allowed him to move in ways that would be impossible for the massive Valkyrie. He learned to strike quickly and retreat before his opponent could counterattack. Princess Zarathek began to notice changes in her pet during his 4th year with the clan. Danny had grown taller and stronger, his muscles becoming more defined from his secret training. His movements had become more confident and purposeful. When she watched him eat, she noticed he no longer picked at his food like a frightened animal, but ate with the calm focus of a predator. "You have been practicing combat," she observed one evening as she watched him in his cage. Danny looked up at her with those strange eyes that had never lost their intelligence. "I watch the warriors train every day. It is interesting to see how they move." "And what do you think of their movements?" Zarathak asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "They are very strong," Danny replied carefully, "but they always attack the same way. Always straightforward, always using the same patterns." Zarathak felt a chill run along her scales. No Valkyrie had ever described their combat techniques in such terms. To them, battle was about honor and strength, not patterns and predictability. Yet now that Danny had pointed it out, she could see what he meant. The conversation was interrupted by warning horns echoing across the settlement. The sound meant immediate danger was approaching. Zarathak grabbed her weapons and rushed outside. Leaving Danny alone in his cage, a pack of thorn beasts had broken through the outer defenses. These creatures were among the most dangerous predators on Zarian Prime, standing nearly as tall as the Valkyrie, but much faster and completely without fear. Their hide was covered with sharp spikes, and their claws could tear through metal. 3 of them had somehow gotten past the guard posts, and were now rampaging through the settlement's outer ring. Warriors rushed to engage the beasts, but the creatures' speed and ferocity made them extremely difficult to fight. Zarathek watched as 2 experienced fighters were badly wounded by a single thorn beast in the space of a few seconds. The beast's spiked hide made it nearly impossible to get close enough for effective attacks. In the chaos of battle, no one noticed the small figure that had slipped out of the princess's quarters and was moving toward the combat zone. Danny had armed himself with his collection of broken weapons and was advancing on the thorn beasts with careful, measured steps. He had studied these creatures during previous attacks, noting how they moved and where their weaknesses might be. Unlike the Valkyrie, who tried to match the beast's strength with their own, Danny had a different plan. The first thorn beast he approached was distracted by 2 warriors who were trying to flank it from opposite sides. Danny moved in low and fast, using a broken spear to strike at the creature's hind legs where the spikes were smallest. The beast roared and spun around, but Danny was already moving, staying beneath its line of sight and continuing to target vulnerable spots. Within minutes, the thorn beast collapsed from multiple wounds to its legs and underbelly. Danny had used the creature's own size and aggression against it, making it tire itself out while he inflicted precise damage to critical areas. The second beast fell to the same tactics, though this time Danny had to dodge several other warriors who were trying to help but only getting in his way. The third thorn beast proved more challenging because it had seen what happened to its packmates and was being more cautious. Danny adapted his approach, using broken armor pieces to distract the creature while he positioned himself for killing strikes. When the beast finally fell, the entire settlement had gone quiet except for the sounds of heavy breathing and wounded warriors. Princess Zarathak stared at Danny in amazement. Her pet, her helpless hatchling, had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. He had killed 3 thorn beasts using nothing but broken weapons and tactics she had never seen before. "How did you do that?" she asked as Danny cleaned the black blood from his improvised weapons. "I'm smaller and faster than they are," Danny replied simply. "And they always attack the same way." Just like the warriors during training, for the first time since finding him, Zarathek began to wonder if she had completely misunderstood what Danny Carter really was. Perhaps he was not a helpless pet after all, but something much more dangerous disguised in a deceptively weak form. That night, as she watched him sleep in his cage, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Tomorrow, she would begin training him properly. Danny Carter stood at the edge of the training ground, his body now lean and muscled after years of secret practice and formal training with Princess Zarathek. At 16 years old, he had grown tall for a human, though he still looked small compared to the massive Valkyrie warriors around him. His skin had darkened from constant exposure to Zarian Prime's harsh sun, and scars marked his arms and chest from countless training sessions. Princess Zarathek watched him with a mixture of pride and unease. Over the past months, she had seen Danny develop skills that surpassed many of their experienced warriors. His human mind seemed to process combat information differently than Valkyrie brains, finding weaknesses and opportunities that her people missed entirely. Yet she knew that many in the clan still saw him as nothing more than her exotic pet. "Today you will face the trials of blood," Zarathek announced to the assembled warriors. "Danny Carter has requested to be tested for warrior status within our clan." A ripple of laughter and disbelief ran through the crowd. The trials of blood were sacred to the Valkyrie, a series of challenges that determined a warrior's rank and worth. No outsider had ever been permitted to attempt them, let alone a creature as apparently weak as the human Gorvik. Now the clan's war leader stepped forward with obvious disapproval. "Princess, this is madness. The trials will kill him within the first hour. He has no natural weapons, no armor, no true strength. The trials test more than physical power," Zarathek replied firmly. "They test courage, intelligence, and the ability to overcome obstacles. Danny has earned the right to prove himself." The first trial was single combat against 3 opponents of increasing skill. Danny would face them one at a time, with only brief rest periods between fights. His first opponent was Tarek, the same young warrior who had questioned saving Danny years earlier. Tarek now stood nearly 10 feet tall, his scales thick as armor and his claws sharp as sword blades. The combat circle was marked with stones, and spectators gathered around its edges. Tarek entered with supreme confidence, flexing his massive arms and displaying his natural weapons. The crowd expected the fight to end quickly with the human's death or severe injury. Danny entered the circle carrying only a simple metal sword and wearing basic leather armor. He looked impossibly small next to his opponent, but his movements were calm and controlled. When the combat signal was given, Tarek charged forward with a roar, expecting to end the fight with a single devastating blow. Danny was not there when the claws arrived. He had moved sideways at the last moment, letting Therax Momentary, the larger warrior, past him. As Tarek stumbled to regain his balance, Danny struck with his sword at the back of the warrior's knee joint, where the scales were thinner and more vulnerable. Tarek spun around with a bellow of rage and pain, but Danny was already moving again. The human seemed to flow like water around his opponent's attacks, never where Tarek expected him to be. Each time the Valkyrie warrior committed to a powerful strike, Danny would redirect that energy against him, using leverage and timing instead of matching strength with strength. Within minutes, Tarek was bleeding from a dozen small wounds and breathing heavily from his efforts to catch the elusive human. Danny, meanwhile, appeared barely winded. When Tarek finally collapsed from blood loss and exhaustion, the watching crowd fell completely silent. Danny's second opponent was Corvex himself, Princess Zarathek's father and leader of the entire clan. The massive warrior was older, but far more experienced than Tarek, and his fighting style was much more disciplined. He did not rush blindly into attacks, but studied Danny's movements and tried to corner him. The fight lasted longer, with both warriors showing respect for each other's abilities. Korvax's experience allowed him to anticipate some of Danny's tactics, but the human's adaptability meant he never used the same approach twice. Eventually, Danny managed to trip the clan leader using a technique that turned Korvax's own weight against him, ending the match without serious injury to either fighter. The third opponent shocked everyone present. Princess Zarethek herself stepped into the combat circle, her eyes fixed on Danny with an expression of grim determination. She was the finest warrior in the clan, faster and stronger than even her father, with reflexes honed by years of hunting the deadliest predators on their world. "I trained you," she said as they faced each other. "Let me see what you have learned that I did not teach." The final combat was unlike anything the Valkyrie had ever witnessed. Princess Zarethek fought with the fluid grace of a master warrior, her movements perfect and her timing flawless. But Danny matched her move for move, countering her techniques with innovations she had never seen before. He fought like no Valkyrie would ever fight, using his environment, his opponent's expectations, and even the crowd's reactions as weapons. When Danny finally managed to pin Zarethek with a hold that used her own strength to immobilize her, the princess looked up at him with an expression of wonder and something that might have been fear. "I yield," she whispered, and the crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. The second trial was a hunt for void stalkers, the most dangerous predators in the deep jungle. These creatures were nearly invisible, could move through trees like shadows, and had never been hunted successfully by a warrior acting alone. The trial required bringing back proof of a kill within 3 days. Danny disappeared into the jungle while the Valkyrie waited and whispered among themselves. Many were convinced they would never see him alive again. Void stalkers had killed experienced hunting parties, and no lone warrior had ever faced one and survived. On the second day, Danny returned carrying not one but 3 void stalker pelts. More shocking still, he showed no signs of serious injury. When questioned about how he had accomplished this impossible feat, he explained his strategy with calm precision. "They hunt by staying hidden and attacking when their prey is tired or distracted," he said. "So I made myself appear tired and distracted while actually staying alert. When they came to attack, I was ready. After I killed the first one, I used its scent to track the others back to their den." The final trial tested leadership abilities. Danny was given command of a squad of young warriors and ordered to retrieve a sacred artifact from a dangerous area filled with hostile creatures and natural traps. Most importantly, he had to bring back his entire squad alive and unharmed. The warriors assigned to him were skeptical and barely concealed their resentment at being commanded by a human. Danny spent the first hour of the mission not moving toward their objective, but instead talking with each warrior individually, learning their strengths, fears, and motivations. By the time they reached the danger zone, Danny had transformed the reluctant group into a coordinated team. He positioned each warrior where their individual skills would be most effective, and he communicated his plans clearly so everyone understood their role. When they encountered the guardian creatures protecting the artifact, Danny's tactical planning allowed them to overcome obstacles that had defeated previous expeditions. They returned with the artifact and every warrior uninjured, something that had never been accomplished in the clan's recorded history. As they entered the settlement, Danny walked at the back of the group, letting his warriors receive the praise while he observed how the clan's attitude toward him had fundamentally changed. Princess Zarethek waited at the settlement center surrounded by the clan elders and senior warriors. In her hands she held the ceremonial marks of warrior rank, but her expression was troubled. She had expected Danny to do well in the trials, but his performance had exceeded even her highest expectations. "Danny Carter," she announced formally, "you have completed the trials of blood with honor. The clan acknowledges your skill and grants you full warrior status." As she placed the warrior marks on his shoulders, Zarethek leaned close and whispered words that only he could hear. "What are you becoming?" Danny met her eyes and smiled, but there was something in that smile that reminded her of the predators she hunted in the deep jungle. "I am becoming what you taught me to be," he replied quietly. "Nothing more and nothing less." Danny Carter, now known to the Valkyrie as Ghostwalker, moved silently through the clan's settlement 3 years after his victory in the Trials of Blood, at 19. He had grown into a formidable warrior whose reputation spread far beyond their territory. His human features had hardened with experience, and his body bore the scars of countless battles. Fought in defense of his adopted people, the morning brought troubling news that would test everything. Danny had learned about warfare and leadership. Messengers arrived at dawn carrying the battle standards of the Bloodfang clan, their traditional enemies from the northern territories. The message they delivered was simple and terrifying. Warlord Crexmore was bringing his entire army south to claim Zarathakis lands and people as his own. Clan leader Corvex gathered his war council in the Great Hall, his aged features showing the weight of the crisis they faced. The Bloodfang clan was larger and more savage than their own people, with warriors who lived only for battle and conquest. Crexmore himself was a legend among the Valkyrie, standing nearly 11 feet tall and said to have never lost a fight in single combat. "They outnumber us 3-1, Gorvik reported grimly. "Their warriors are larger and more brutal than ours. If we meet them in open battle, we will be destroyed. Then we will die with honor," Corvex replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "It is the Valkyrie way. We do not flee from stronger enemies, and we do not beg for mercy." Danny listened to the discussion with growing frustration. The Valkyrie approach to warfare was built around concepts of honor and tradition that made no sense when facing extinction. They would march out to meet their enemies in fair combat, fight bravely, and die gloriously while achieving nothing useful. "There is another way," Danny said quietly, but his words carried clearly through the hall. The War Council turned to look at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Many of the older warriors still struggled to accept advice from someone they had once considered a pet, despite his proven abilities. "Speak, Ghostwalker," Princess Zarathak encouraged. "Your wisdom has served us well." Before Danny stepped forward into the center of the circle, his mind already working through the tactical possibilities. "The Bloodfang clan expects us to meet them in traditional battle. They are counting on our honor to make us predictable. But what if we do not give them the fight they expect?" "You speak of cowardice," growled one of the elder warriors. "The Valkyrie do not hide from their enemies like frightened prey animals." "I speak of victory," Danny replied calmly. "Dead warriors have no honor. Living warriors can protect their families and their clan, which matters more." He moved to the war table and began pointing to locations on the territorial map. "The Bloodfang army must cross 3 narrow valleys to reach our settlement. In each valley, the terrain favors defenders over attackers. We can use their size and numbers against them." Corvex studied the map with interest despite his reservations. "What do you propose, young warrior?" Danny's plan was unlike anything the Valkyrie had ever considered. Instead of meeting the enemy in open combat, he suggested a series of ambush and sabotage operations designed to weaken the Bloodfang forces before they ever reached the main settlement. His strategy involved attacking supply lines, creating false information about their defensive positions, and using the enemy's own aggressive nature to lure them into carefully prepared traps. "This is not honorable warfare," protested several council members. "Our ancestors would be ashamed of such tactics. Our ancestors never faced an enemy this powerful," Danny countered. "Honor means nothing if our people are enslaved or killed. Sometimes survival requires new approaches." Princess Zarathak found herself torn between her warrior training and her growing trust in Danny's tactical genius. She had seen him accomplish impossible things before, but what he proposed went against everything she had been taught about proper warfare. "The Council will consider your suggestions," Corvex announced diplomatically. "But we cannot abandon old tradition for the sake of convenience." That night, Zarathak visited Danny in his quarters, her expression troubled and uncertain. "The Council has rejected your plan. They believe it shows weakness and dishonor. Tomorrow we march out to meet Crexmore in open battle." Danny nodded, having expected this response. "And how many of our warriors will survive such a battle?" "Perhaps 1 in 10 if we fight well, she admitted reluctantly. But they will die as true Valkyrie warriors. What about the non-warriors? The elderly, the young, the females who do not fight? What happens to them when 1 in 10 warriors returns home? Defeated? Zarathak had no answer for that question because they both knew what the Bloodfang clan did to conquered territories. The survivors would face slavery, abuse, or death depending on Crexmore's mood. I want you to authorize me to implement my plan anyway, Danny said quietly. Give me 50 volunteers and permission to operate independently. The main army can march out for their honorable battle, but let me try a different approach with a small force. If my father discovers I authorize such actions, it could be considered treason, Zarathak warned. If your father's approach fails, everyone will be dead anyway, Danny replied. What is treason compared to extinction? After a long moment of internal struggle, Zarathak nodded. Choose your volunteers carefully. And Ghostwalker? Make sure your way works, because if it fails, I will die alongside my father on the battlefield. Danny spent the next hours selecting warriors who were willing to follow his unconventional tactics. He chose younger fighters who were more flexible in their thinking, along with scouts and hunters who understood stealth and patience. By dawn, he had assembled a force of 48 volunteers plus himself, while the main Valkyrie army marched north toward their honorable defeat. Danny led his small force into the jungle using paths that would bring them ahead of the Bloodfang. Advance. His plan required perfect timing and absolute coordination, but if executed properly, it would turn the enemy's strengths into fatal weaknesses. The first phase involved attacking the Bloodfang supply train in the northern valley. Danny's force struck at night, using hit-and-run tactics to destroy food stores and weapons without engaging in direct combat. They made their attacks look like the work of local predators rather than enemy warriors, leaving the Bloodfang leaders confused about what was happening. The second phase targeted the enemy's communications. Danny had studied how the Bloodfang clan coordinated their large army, and he systematically eliminated their message runners and signal posts. This left different parts of their force unable to communicate effectively with each other. The final phase was the most dangerous and required Danny to rely completely on his understanding of Valkyrie psychology. He used captured Bloodfang equipment to send false messages that redirected portions of their army into areas where natural hazards would thin their numbers. Swamps with hidden predators, unstable cliff faces, and regions where poisonous plants grew in abundance all became weapons in his unconventional war. By the time the main Bloodfang force reached the area where they expected to fight the Valkyrie army, they had lost nearly half their number to what seemed like a series of natural disasters and unfortunate accidents. More importantly, their remaining warriors were tired, confused, and demoralized by the strange events that had plagued their march. When Warlord Crexmore finally encountered Corvex and the main Valkyrie force, the battle was far more even than anyone had expected. But the real surprise came when Crexmore, frustrated by his army's inexplicable problems, challenged Princess Zarathak to single combat to end the conflict quickly. Before Zarathak could respond, Danny stepped forward from where he had been waiting in concealment. I claim the right of champion as her bonded warrior. Crexmore stared down at the human with contempt and amusement. The helpless hatchling wants to die quickly? Very well, I will crush you and then take the princess as my prize. As the two warriors faced each other in the combat circle, Danny smiled with the calm confidence of a predator who had already won. All his years of training, all his accumulated knowledge of Valkyrie anatomy and psychology, all his human adaptability and strategic thinking, had led to this moment. The fight that followed would become legend among the Valkyrie, but its outcome was never really in doubt. The combat circle had been marked with stones, and warriors from both clans gathered around its edges to witness what many expected to be a quick execution. Warlord Crexmore stood nearly 11 feet tall, his massive frame covered in thick battle scars that told the story of countless victories. His claws were longer than Danny's fingers, and his natural armor had been reinforced with metal plates that made him look like a walking fortress. Danny Carter entered the circle carrying only his sword and wearing the same simple armor he had used during his trials years earlier. At 21, he had reached his full height as a human but still appeared impossibly small next to the legendary Bloodfang warlord. The difference in size was so extreme that many watching warriors felt uncomfortable, as if they were about to witness a massacre rather than a fair fight. "Last chance to run away, little hatchling," Crexmore rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "I have killed hundreds of warriors stronger than you. Your death will mean nothing." Danny tested the weight of his sword and checked the position of his feet, his movements calm and measured. "I have studied your fighting style through the reports of survivors from your previous battles. You rely on intimidation and overwhelming force. That works well against opponents who think like you do." Crexmore's eyes narrowed at the human's casual tone. "You think too much, small one. In battle, thought is weakness. Only strength matters. We will see," Danny replied simply, when the signal was given to begin combat. Crexmore charged forward with a speed that seemed impossible for something so large. His strategy was simple and had never failed: overwhelm his opponent with pure aggression before they could adapt to his massive reach and strength. Most enemies died within the first few seconds, crushed by claws that could punch through metal. Armor. Danny was not there when the claws arrived. He had moved at the last possible moment, letting the warlord's momentum carry him past while staying just outside the range of those devastating weapons. As Crexmore stumbled slightly from his missed attack, Danny struck with surgical precision at the back of the giant's ankle, targeting a nerve cluster he had memorized from his years of studying Valkyrie anatomy. The strike did not cause serious damage, but it sent a shock of pain up Crexmore's leg that made him roar in surprise and fury. No opponent had ever dared to attack him from behind, and certainly none had possessed the knowledge to target such a specific weak point. Crexmore spun around and launched a series of devastating claw strikes, each one capable of tearing a normal warrior in half. But Danny seemed to flow like water around each attack, never quite where the warlord expected him to be. The human's movements were unlike anything the Bloodfang warriors had ever seen, combining perfect timing with an understanding of leverage and momentum that turned their leader's own strength against him. Minutes passed, then more minutes, and still the fight continued. Crexmore began to breathe heavily from his efforts to catch the elusive human, while Danny appeared barely winded. More concerning for the Bloodfang warriors was that their mighty leader was now bleeding from dozens of small wounds that Danny had inflicted with quick strikes to vulnerable areas. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Crexmore bellowed, frustrated by his inability to land a decisive blow. "I am fighting exactly like a warrior," Danny replied calmly as he ducked under another massive swing. A human warrior, the psychological aspect of the battle was as important as the physical one. Danny could see doubt beginning to creep into Crexmore's eyes as the warlord realized that his traditional tactics were completely ineffective against this strange opponent. The watching Bloodfang warriors were shifting nervously, uncertain how their invincible leader could be struggling against such a small enemy. Danny began to implement the final phase of his strategy. Instead of simply avoiding Crexmore's attacks, he started to redirect them, using the warlord's own momentum and aggression to position him where Danny wanted him. When Crexmore charged forward, Danny would step aside and use his sword to guide that massive bulk toward obstacles. When the warlord swung his claws, Danny would duck and let the force of the swing throw Crexmore off balance. The end came suddenly and decisively. Crexmore, exhausted and increasingly desperate, committed everything to one final devastating attack that should have split Danny in half. Instead, the human dropped to one knee and drove his sword upward with perfect timing, letting the warlord's own charging weight impale him on the blade. The massive Bloodfang leader took 2 more steps before realizing what had happened. He looked down at the sword protruding from his chest, then at the human who had somehow accomplished the impossible. With a final roar that sounded more confused than angry, Crexmore collapsed and died. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved or spoke as the reality of what they had witnessed slowly sank in. The legendary warlord Crexmore, undefeated in hundreds of battles, had been killed by a human who barely reached his chest in height. Princess Zarathak was the first to break the silence. "The Bloodfang clan will surrender and withdraw from our territory," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the battlefield. "Their leader is dead, and according to your own traditions, his defeat means the end of this war." The Bloodfang warriors looked at each other uncertainly, then at Danny, who stood calmly beside their fallen leader. Several of the younger ones began to back away, fear evident in their movements. They had thought themselves the ultimate predators, but they had just watched something smaller and apparently weaker destroy their greatest champion with almost casual efficiency. "We surrender," announced Crexmore's second-in-command, his voice hollow with shock. The human has proven himself the stronger warrior. As the Bloodfang forces began their withdrawal, the Valkyrie warriors surrounded Danny with expressions of awe and something approaching worship. He had accomplished something that should have been impossible, defeating an enemy who outweighed him by hundreds of pounds and possessed every natural advantage. But the real change came in how Princess Zarathak looked at him. The being she had once found as a helpless hatchling, the pet she had kept for her own amusement, had just demonstrated capabilities that surpassed anything in Valkyrie history. She found herself uncertain how to relate to someone who had so completely exceeded her understanding of what was possible. In the days following their victory, the clan elders met in emergency session to discuss Danny's status. His defeat of Crexmore had implications that went far beyond a simple victory in combat. By Valkyrie tradition, the warrior who killed an enemy leader in single combat gained authority over that leader's former domain. "The human has proven himself superior to our greatest enemy," clan leader Corvex announced to the assembled council. "By right of conquest and demonstration of superior ability, he must be recognized as war chief of this clan." Princess Zarathak felt something cold settle in her stomach at those words. War chief was a position that technically placed Danny above her in all matters relating to clan defense and military action. The helpless creature she had saved from the wreckage was now being granted authority over her and her people. "Do you accept this responsibility, Danny Carter?" Corvex asked formally. Danny looked around the circle of Valkyrie leaders, these massive reptilian beings who had once looked down on him as an amusing pet. Now they waited for his decision with the respect they would show to any superior predator. "I accept," he said quietly, "but only if Princess Zarathak agrees to serve as my second-in-command. Her knowledge of this clan and her fighting abilities are essential for our continued success." All eyes turned to Zarathak, waiting for her response. She could challenge Danny for leadership, as was her right, but they had already fought once during his trials, and she knew the outcome would be the same. She could refuse to serve under him, but that would mean abandoning her responsibility to protect her people. "I will serve," she said finally, the words feeling strange in her mouth. "The clan's survival is more important than my pride." Danny nodded with satisfaction, then surprised everyone by addressing the broader implications of their situation. "There will be other enemies, other challenges that require new approaches. We must be willing to adapt and learn, even when that means abandoning old traditions that no longer serve us." As the council meeting ended and the participants began to file out, Zarathak remained behind to speak with Danny privately. She struggled to find words for the emotions churning inside her. "How does it feel," she asked finally, "to have risen from pet to master?" Danny considered the question seriously before answering. "I never wanted to be anyone's master. I wanted to prove that strength comes in many forms and that survival matters more than tradition. Your people gave me a chance to become something greater than what I was, and now I want to help them become greater than what they are." Outside the council chamber, the sounds of celebration continued as the clan marked their victory over the Bloodfang forces. But inside, two beings who had shared an extraordinary journey sat in comfortable silence, each understanding that their relationship had fundamentally changed forever. In the distance, barely visible against the stars, ships moved through space carrying signals that had finally reached their destination. Soon,